r/NoSleep. Posted by u/horror, junkie123. I'm a barista at a coffee shop for the dead. I just worked my strangest shift yet. Yeah, you read that right. And before you ask, no, I'm not dead. I'm a clairvoyant of sorts. As cliché as it sounds, I can see the deceased. That's what drew me to this little hole-in-the-wall coffee shop in the first place. Well, that and my dire need for employment. I had just graduated from high school, and I was struggling to find my purpose in the world. I wasn't smart enough to make it into a decent 4-year college, and I wasn't exactly cut out for trade school either. On top of that, my parents were going to kick me out if I didn't find a job soon. That's when I stumbled upon Aftermath Coffee. My eyes lit up when they fell on the peeling yellow "We're hiring" sign. It boasted a ridiculously high starting pay compared to similar jobs in the area. I just knew that it was the job for me. Without hesitation, I yanked the door open and walked in. Should I have put a little bit more thought into it? Probably. Did I care? Not at all. I marched straight up to the counter where a lanky 20-something-year-old man stood. Though his eyes were shrouded by black, greasy bangs, I could see them grow wide as dinner plates as I approached. "Hey! My name's Kala. You guys are hiring, right?" I said, maintaining fierce eye contact as the flustered barista hurriedly averted his gaze. "Why you? You can see me?" I mentally facepalmed myself. I thought there was something strange about him. How did I not notice it sooner? The barista was dead. You see, dead people have this aura about them. It's how I've always been able to easily differentiate between the living and the deceased. There's a sort of black cloud that follows them. A swarm of darkness that clings to their presence like cigarette smoke. And this guy was no exception. "Oh, yeah. So, are you hiring or not?" His pallid face began to twist in confusion. "Hold on, let me get this straight. You're alive, you know that I'm dead, and you still want a job here?" "Yeah. It's not that hard to comprehend, dude." Just by the look on his face, I could tell that he was struggling to process my statement. He stared at me blankly, brows knitted together, head cocked to the side like a curious dog. I sighed. This wasn't my first rodeo. "I can see that you're not getting it, so I'll spell it out for you. I've had this gift, or curse, depending on how you look at it, ever since I was a little girl. No, I don't know how I got it. My great-aunt Margaret could have jerked off a demon for all I know. I honestly don't care either. I usually don't interact with dead people because I always end up needing to explain myself, like right now, but as far as I'm concerned, you're all like normal people to me. I mean, except for the 1,000-yard stares and screwed-up appearances, that is." The barista pursed his lips, his gaze fixed to the cash register. He reluctantly glanced up at me. "I'll have to get the manager. Wait here." I nodded, watching as he disappeared into the back. I took that opportunity to drink in my surroundings. Now that I was looking at it, the shop did seem a little dreary. I peered at all the dust-coated tables and chairs. Only 2 were occupied. A burly man with a nasty road rash seared into his face sat at the table closest to the door. He wore a tattered leather jacket and jeans. I thought I could still make out bits of pavement caught in his scraggly beard. He stared deeply into his coffee cup. I wondered what he was thinking about. A second man wearing a dark brown fedora had claimed a seat against the wall. A torn, yellow newspaper obscured his face from view. I stood on my tiptoes trying to catch a glimpse of him, but his features were fully shielded. I sighed, lowering back to my feet. Footsteps suddenly emerged from behind me, shattering my reverie. I spun around and stifled a gasp. A hulking behemoth of a man stood before me. He must have been at least 7 feet tall, and he was not slim either. Each of his forearms were as big around as my torso. His scruffy brown hair was unkempt, like he just rolled out of bed. He was by far the biggest dead man, or man in general, for that matter, that I had ever laid eyes on. The barista stared at the ground as that absolute beast of a human spoke. "You are looking for job, yes?" he bellowed in a heavy Russian accent. I timidly nodded. Why yeah." He grinned, showcasing rows of jagged, yellow teeth. "Good. Come to office." I diligently obeyed, mirroring his monstrous steps until we found ourselves standing in a cramped, cluttered room. Papers were strewn everywhere, and there was a distinct, putrid stench to it. It was so strong. So all-encompassing. I thought something had died in there. As I would come to find out later. Something had. "I am Ivan. Your name?" he asked, shutting the door. "Kala. Nice to meet you," I said, trying to subdue the tremble in my hand as I extended it to him. "Pleasure is mine. Sit," Ivan ordered, ignoring my gesture. "Rude," I mumbled, pulling out the dingy wooden seat before me. Ivan plopped down behind his desk. The chair groaned under his weight. He leaned forward, that devious smile returning to his lips. "How old you are, girl?" I rolled my eyes. "First off, my name is Kala, not girl, and I'm 18. Good, good. When you can start?" I stared at him blankly for a moment. Don't you want to see my resume first?" I said, beginning to rummage through my purse. "Just let me." Ivan held up a meaty hand. "Not necessary. Job is yours. Answer please, Miss Kala." My eyes lit up. I was expecting the job search to last weeks, possibly even months. Could it really have been that easy? "Great. I can start whenever. I have nothing but time," I said, beaming back at him. "Excellent. First shift start now," Ivan smirked, digging under the desk. He produced a faded green apron and tossed it to me. I gracefully dropped it on the floor. "Really? I didn't mean right that minute. I guess I should have been more specific." "Steven will train. Talk with him," he said, standing to lead me out the door. "Okay, but Steven will answer question. Glad to have you." Ivan hurriedly ushered me out of the room. Slam. The door rattled in its frame as it closed in my face. That was weird. I timidly returned to the counter where Steven stood. His striking brown eyes locked with mine and a glimmer of hope flashed across them. "I'm guessing that you got the job." "Yeah. I did. Ivan said that you'll be training me." A smile began to inch across Steven's face. "Congratulations. Welcome to Aftermath. I won't bore you with the details of the training process. You came here to read about my strangest shift, not my first one. That's a tale for another day. I'd been working at Aftermath for a little over a year when it happened." "The regular, right Frank?" "Yep. You know me so well, Kala. You remember the biker that I mentioned earlier, right?" "Yeah, that's Frank." "That'll be $7.13. Anything else?" "Yeah," he said, slapping a crumpled 10 onto the counter, "your soul." He stared at me intensely. I narrowed my eyes on him. "Frank, you tell the same joke every day. It doesn't get any funnier the 500th time you say it," I grumbled, handing him his change. "Come on, Kala. Would it kill you to give me a chuckle every once in a while? Where's your sense of humor?" "It died when I started working here." "Buzzkill," he muttered as he slunk away. I was putting the finishing touches on Frank's blonde espresso when I felt it. A presence. Something dark. Sinister almost. That feeling used to startle me. Not anymore, though. I turned to find a man in a brown fedora with a newspaper tucked under his arm. I stifled a scream. "Remember that other guy I told you about? That's Nona. Short for no name. The problem? I'd never seen him without that newspaper hiding his face. His hat was angled downward so I still couldn't see his features, but the fact that he was so exposed, in that moment, it frightened me. He's coming." My heart thumped furiously against my ribcage. My head began to spin and I nearly dropped Frank's coffee. I had never heard Nona speak before. It sounded like his meals consisted solely of broken glass and 2 packs of cigarettes for dessert. What? "He's coming. Beware." Nona shuffled away, claiming his normal seat at the back of the shop. I turned to Steven. His eyes looked like they were about to pop out of his skull. "Have you ever heard him talk?" I whispered, voice trembling. "No. Never. I didn't know he could." Steven's face drained of color. He leaned against the counter for support. "What did he mean by that?" I asked, struggling to comprehend Nona's cryptic message. "No clue. I think we need to tell Ivan about this." I nodded and Steven straightened up before trotting to Ivan's office. I was left alone to man the register. "Hey, are you done with my order yet?" Frank's gruff voice ripped me from my stupor. Freaking Frank, man. "Oh shit. Yeah, sorry." I sheepishly handed him the now shaken espresso. He mumbled something about the shop needing a new barista before trundling back to his seat. I scoffed, returning to taking inventory, when suddenly, I felt it. The atmosphere shifted. The temperature plummeted and I could feel something evil in the air. Something dark, twisted, and sinister. My blood ran cold when I heard the familiar jingle of the door opening. I hesitantly glanced up. I don't think I'll ever forget what I saw. A slim man wearing a sleek black suit sauntered through the door. He adjusted his blood-red tie as he approached. Pitch black horns protruded from the rat's nest of messy blonde hair atop his head. His striking blue eyes seemed to stare through me as a grin plastered itself across his face. That's not what really scared me, though. He dragged a thick, rusted chain link behind him. And at the end of that chain link? A man. A bloody, emaciated Japanese man followed diligently on all fours like some kind of fucked up dog. The collar around his neck was so tight that I thought it might snap. A pang of guilt struck my chest like a lightning bolt as he peered up at me with those hopeless, vacant eyes. Verrier. Ivan appeared behind me, snarling like a grizzly bear. Steven took refuge behind him. Ah, Ivan. Long time no see. He was rewarded with a sharp scowl. You were banned. Get out. Verrier's sly grin only grew wider. Now, Ivan. That's no way to speak to a dear old colleague. I miss those days, you know. Ivan slammed his massive fist onto the counter, sending a tremor through the entire shop. He turned to Steven and me. Go to office. You do not need to see this. We immediately obeyed, peeking around the corner of the doorframe. Who's Verrier? I muttered, mindful to keep quiet. The demon of disobedience. He and Ivan have a past. Last time he stopped by, it wasn't pretty. I pursed my lips. The demon of disobedience dragging a man on a leash. Oh, the irony. Out of my periphery, I could see Frank slithering toward the door. I didn't blame him. I would have left too if I could get away with it. Nona, on the other hand, was still as a statue. He was just standing with his head down beside his usual spot. Honestly, I was more scared of him than the demon screwing with my boss. I'm not at all surprised to see that your manners, or lack thereof, have further deteriorated since our last encounter. You really should work on that, Verrier hissed, snapping me from my stupor. He was almost giggling with a childlike enthusiasm. I will not ask again. Why are you here? Ivan bellowed menacingly. I was just stopping by for a latte. And maybe a pup cup for my good little boy here. Isn't that right, Mitsuru? Bark for me, he demanded, patting his victim's head. The man, who I now knew to be Mitsuru, reluctantly obeyed. Weak barks escaped his lips, shattering my heart. I wished there was some way that I could help him. But I was no match for a demon, and I knew it. Perfect. Sit. Mitsuru did as he was told. Verrier reached into his pocket and produced a small chunk of meat. He tossed it to his captive, who caught it in his mouth and began to chew. He winced as he did so. I briefly caught his gaze. His eyes looked so desolate. So broken. They pleaded with me to help, to do something other than cower and watch. I'm ashamed to admit that that's exactly what I did. You have had your fun. Now go, Ivan boomed. Verrier waved him off, turning to his abductee. Stay. Then, he marched behind the counter. My heart was beating a mile a minute. Though slight, I could see Ivan trembling. I never thought I'd encounter someone who would strike genuine fear into that man. But here he was. Verrier grabbed a fistful of Ivan's shirt and pulled him down to his level. He whispered something into his ear before releasing him. Ivan's eyes grew wide as saucers. Then, Verrier turned toward Steven and me. He began to approach us, taking slow, calculated steps. He was halfway to the office when a dark mass materialized behind him. Nona. Nona silently placed a gloved hand on Verrier's shoulder and spun him around. I could practically see the steam wafting from the demon's ears. Who the hell do you think you are, touching me like that? I ought to. Nona began to slowly lift his head, revealing his face to Verrier. Steven covered my eyes with his hand. We're not supposed to see this, he murmured. What the fuck is that thing? Verrier cried, terror seeping into his words. On second thought, I'm going to leave. Take care, Ivan. I could hear the sound of the chain jangling and heavy footsteps, followed by the door slamming shut. Needless to say, when Steven removed his hand, Verrier and his companion were gone. Thank you, my friend. For you, free coffee for year. Nona simply flashed him a thumbs up and returned to his seat. I glanced up at Steven. I was still quivering from the adrenaline rush. What the hell just happened? He sternly locked eyes with me, his visage cold and unwavering. As you've come to find out, there are demons that roam the earth alongside the living and the dead. Nona, well, he's something else. Just pray that you never have to find out what.